Let me give the stage to our first speaker, Maxim Muzafarov. Maxim, hi, how are you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Maxim Muzafarov. So I think we can start with the latest Apache Ignite release 2.11. So let me briefly introduce myself and my coordinates. My name is Maxim Muzafarov. I'm Apache Ignite PMC member and a part of the Sberbank database core team. This is my email, so you can mail me any questions you want to ask. And let's start. This my speech based on the Apache blog post for the latest release. So from my point of view, there are three main features that comes with latest release. So first of all, we expose the public API for the database for the cellular clusters databases. So this is a type of Apache Ignite used as in database mode, in distributed database mode, and is as an embedded mode. So this feature is suited for the database mode. You can split the cluster for virtual cells, use the affinity function plus so-called cluster node attribute backup filter. So the ring is split uh, into virtual cells. This will help to reduce the impact of cells on each other in case of one of the node crashed, and also increases the transaction recovery speed. I think this is a mistake, my. So their non-affected cells will be alive faster. Uh, let's look on the measurements, some performance measurements between the latest release and 2.9. So for left and failed node, we have, from my point of view, a significantly grew up for the alive cells, and broken cells looks like uh, a bit more faster rather than it was in 2.9 release. This is a ring. This is a zookeeper. So the a ring, the cluster based on zookeeper. So okay, let's take a look at the new page replacement policies. This comes with the latest release. So if the memory, if the heap memory is not enough for all the data you desire to add to the cluster, the page replacement policies comes into place. So you can check the new segmented LRU algorithm, all clock algorithm. They have some maybe some advantages and disadvantages in all of the places. So for some of the operation, you should check the best algorithm replacement you want to add to the cluster and configure it in configuration. And the next one is snapshot restore and check commands. We add the automatic restore command on the active cluster using Ctrl+H, and for consistency checks and for self calming, we can use the snapshot check command to check all the snapshot for consistency. So I'd like to mention that Snapshot has the same database structure as the Ignite does. So previously, before this release, you must you must stop the cluster and copy these files manually to the work directory for each node, and after it start the cluster. That code, that snapshot, is restored. From this release we add this command to the control H, and you can restore as full snapshot, and the same way as any of cache groups persistent in this snapshot. This is my top 3 improvements of the Ignite release, and also have a few slides to discuss the next Apache Ignite releases, because from my point of view, they are also important. First of all, let's talk about the deprecation and removal command, because it is a breaking changes for the next few releases, and this is a list of Ignite features previously added to the Ignite code base, but the community agreed to remove it. First of all, it's the MVCC, local caches, some cache configurations like rebalance delay, and also legacy service grid implementation and metrics implementation command. So for those who use these commands, be aware that in the next release 2.12, this functionality is deprecated, and we're going to remove it in the next release. And the features that I'd like to share some links for the features that I expected to be included in the next releases. So I think the most interesting from this list is Apache Calcit. So the Ignite is migrating from the H2 to the new SQL framework. Also, from my point of view, interesting feature is a non-SQL index API. So we can build the index based on some cache data and use this index from the new API without enabling the SQL. And also, I think some of some features that may be interesting for you too is the middleware for Ignite services. It's like a new, we're adding, providing to the user some internal Ignite service context. So the new Ignite services may be used more roughly. So, okay, that's all that I want to say about the new release and the upcoming features. So I think for the questions we will have time, and I'd like to the next speaker to move to the next speaker, Pavel.
Thank you, Maxim. Guys, if you have any comments, any questions, please share with us in our chat. And I'm introducing Pavel. Pavel, here's your stage. Take your stage.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Pavel. I work on client protocols and all things about .NET in Apache Ignite. And today we'll have a look at what's new in Ignite 2.11 and Ignite 3.0 Alpha 3 later. So let's start with 2.11, where we now have a thin client data streamer improved examples, and full support for .NET 5 and 6. And then after Valentin introduces Ignite 3.0 Alpha 3, I will talk about thin clients there. So let's move on to the 2.11. First, the data streamer API, which is the most efficient way to load large amounts of data into Ignite clusters, is now available in the .NET Thin client. As you would expect, Thin Streamer automatically buffers the data, groups it into per node batches, and sends those batches in parallel to the server nodes according to the current affinity distribution. So the client understands that those keys belong to this server, those keys belong to this server, and so on. And once the given buffer fills in, it gets sent to the server in background, while you can still use the API to add more data. If a server node fails, corresponding operations are retried transparently. So at least once delivery is guaranteed. Adding new nodes to the topology is also properly handled. Once a new node arrives and joins the cluster, Thin Client discovers this new node and allocates a buffer accordingly. The API is thread safe, so you can use the same streamer instance from multiple threads. For example, you can use parallel for each API to improve streaming performance even more. And according to our benchmarks, Thin Streamer performance is equal to the existing Thick Streamer API. Now, let's see a quick demo. First, I'll start 3 server nodes locally using this simple program which simply runs ignition start. So let me run this 3 times. And as you can see, those servers form the cluster of 3 nodes. Now, I'll run this streaming program. I'll use stopwatch to measure the whole process of connecting the client to the cluster and streaming 100,000 items into the cache. I'll use a debug logger to see that we actually have 3 connections to every server node. I mean, 1 connection per node and 3 in total. And the streaming itself is very simple. You just loop and add more data. So let me run this program. And we can see that indeed 3 connections were established to the different server nodes. And one of the connections was established before we got the client instance back, and the other 2 were established in background. So even though I only have 1 endpoint here, the client discovers the entire cluster automatically, which is possible thanks to the feature called automatic server discovery. This was added a bit earlier in Ignite 2.9, but still worth mentioning. So we can see that those 100,000 items were streamed in just over 1 second, and this includes connecting to the cluster. And this kind of performance was not possible before because thick clients require more time and resources to start up. Now let's move on to the .NET 5 support. Let me stop all the notes here first and switch to my presentation. So Ignite now supports .NET 5 and 6 officially. Among all the features in those versions, 2 of them are of interest to us, which are records and single file publish. Records in C# are just normal classes and structs, but they come with built-in functionality such as formatting, constructors, and value equality. Records work great as Ignite cache keys and values. Value equality is especially useful because it matches Ignite equality semantics. Let's have a look at the code. So here I have defined 2 records, employee and employee key, with a couple of properties on them. And I have 2 different keys, 2 different instances of the employee key record, but both of them have the same property values. And this means that even though there are 2 different instances, they will be treated as equal both by Apache Ignite and the .NET itself. So I can use key 1 to add data into Ignite cache, which I have started here, and use key 1 to add data into a regular .NET dictionary. And then I use key 2 to retrieve the data back. Let's see how this works. So we can see that the value is retrieved successfully from the Ignite cache and from a regular dictionary using a different instance with the same property values. This means that with the records, the behavior is consistent across Ignite caches and regular collections, which makes our code cleaner, and we don't have to think twice about handling our data in different ways. Personally, I like records a lot, and I use them all the time in my code. Also, single file publish is supported for all scenarios now: server nodes, thick and thin clients. For example, we can publish this records demo, which is in Ignite server application, because it starts the server node here. We can publish it with the following command. Let me run this and explain it later. So, oops, let me open the terminal. Okay. So, if I run this command, everything, which includes our C# code here, Ignite library code, and Ignite Java library code, will be packaged into a single binary without any dependencies. Let me change into the pub directory and see how this looks. So this binary takes about 90 megabytes, and you can simply copy it anywhere, give it to the users, or put it into a Docker file. So the single file publish simplifies dependencies and deployments. And last but not least, new examples. Original Ignite.NET examples were created even before .NET Core was released. And then later we have added separate .NET Core examples, and now finally all of them are fully reworked. You can run them on any operating system in any IDE or even from the command line. And they are now easier to install with NuGet. No need to download the entire Ignite distribution or its entire source code. You can just use those two simple commands. The first one installs the examples on your machine, and the second one creates the actual projects in a given directory. So let me show this. Let's create a directory here. Let's say. And so I simply run .NET new Ignite examples, and I get everything in this directory. So examples are grouped by different modes: thick, thin, some shared code, the server node that you can start the cluster with. And let's run one of them. My favorite is the LinkU example, so I go into thick, SQL, LinkU. And it's just a couple files, the project file and the program file. And I can say .NET run here. And we see that the cluster, the node starts, and we perform some query. The SQL generated from our C# code, and the results of the query are here. So with those simple 3 commands, we installed the examples and started them locally. And I hope this makes it easier to explore Ignite features for our users. And that's it for me on 2.11. And now we can, let me switch here. So now I think we can discuss questions, if you have any, on the 2.11 before we move on to the 3.0. Evgenia, can you please handle questions and answers?
Okay, just one question for you. May I share the links that you've given me for the participants, or should I wait it till the end of our?
Well, yes, I have a few links that dive into those topics a bit more, but you can share them later, I think.
Oh, sorry. I've already sent
let's
some of them.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Guys, if you have some questions to Pavel or to Maxim, I'm adding him to our stream. Please ask. Feel free to share your thoughts, your ideas, your issues, and so on. What for me, uh, guys? What looks like? Sorry, looks like we've got a lot of new things and so on. Could you tell our participants if they want to become a part of the community, of the Apache Ignite community? How can they, well, talk to you, ask you when the event will end, and so on? How they can connect you
So,
as a member of community?
so the question is how do the users connect to the members of community? Am I right?
Yep.
Uh,
Maybe they will want to ask something later and so on.
well, the main way of communicating with community is our user list. I understand that mailing lists are a bit like outdated, maybe to some people, because modern ways of communications are chats and channels and stuff like this. I think we have a Russian-speaking Telegram channel. We also have a community on Stack Overflow where you can ask questions using the Ignite tag. What else do we have?
Okay, thank you. Well, let us go to the second part of our meeting, and I'm introducing you Valentin.
Hi guys. Can you hear me
Hello.
fine? All good? All right.
Yes, everything is okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Evgenia. Thank you guys for the great overview of the 211. A lot of interesting stuff there. So I would like to give a quick update on what is happening with Ignite 3. My name is Val. I'm an Apache Ignite PMC member, and I also work at GridGain as a product manager. And I'm basically curating everything that is related to Apache Ignite development that we're doing within GridGain. And that includes the Ignite 3 development, which is kind of the next generation of the platform that we're working on. All right. We're working on. And yeah, if you haven't heard, basically there are two major goals behind this whole project, this whole initiative that started, I think, in October last year, so pretty much 1 year ago. So there are two major goals. The first one is just general modernization of the product, general modernization of the platform, which means replacing some of the legacy formats and some of the legacy protocols with more kind of modern technologies. Just as a couple of examples, we're replacing the XML configuration format, which is essentially kind of a Spring format. It's coming from Spring framework, and it's a legacy format. Even Spring doesn't really use it anymore. They switch to annotations and other stuff. So we want to replace that with something more usable and something less kind of cumbersome. And in this specific instance, we're switching to Hawkon format, which is kind of essentially positioned as a human readable JSON. So it's an extension of JSON, which is much better suitable for this kind of cases. On the more kind of architectural side, again, as probably the most prominent example, we're switching to Raft protocol for all the data replication purposes. As you may know, we're currently Ignite uses kind of a essentially homegrown protocol that's been created several years ago, and we want to switch to Raft because it's it's mathematically proven. It's also kind of a battle tested protocol that is used by many databases, many systems, and we we know it works. So we want to utilize that as well. And also another thing is also to make Ignite more kind of cloud native. Provide better integration with Kubernetes, with Docker, with OpenShift, and other kind of cloud deployment frameworks, cloud providers, and this kind of thing. So obviously, we see that we have more and more users running Ignite in cloud rather than on premises, and we need to adapt platform to that as well. So this is something we're looking into as well in terms of kind of this modernization stream. The second goal is usability, and this is a very big thing for Ignite 3, probably the biggest one. Again, Ignite 2.x exists for a while. It's been out there for I don't know how many years, several years. And since then, it's changed a lot in terms of use cases it covers and applications it can be used for. Just to add a little color to this, Ignite 2.0, the first version of Ignite 2.x, did not even have persistence storage. So it was just a caching data grid solution that would run as an in-memory store or on top of legacy database or something like that. So and then the persistence was introduced, which transformed it into essentially a database, a system of record. So it's a huge change, and it's not the only one. And the product never went through any transformation in terms of the API change and architectural change. And because of that, it's not always easy to use. It's a very flexible, powerful platform, but especially for newcomers who go to Ignite website, download the product, and try to run it, it's not always super intuitive, and we want to fix that as well. And that includes multiple things. Probably the most major ones are improved installation upgrade procedures. So just make it easier to install and upgrade Ignite, to make sure the user can do that without manually moving jar files around and creating configuration files and these kind of things. So just simplify those procedures. Also introduce full dynamic configuration and transparent schema management. What that means is essentially making sure that configuration parameters and table schemas can be updated in runtime without a need to restart a node, without a need to restart a cluster, and also just provide better APIs and kind of unified APIs for all those procedures. Because, for example, with the configuration in 2.x, it's very convoluted because configuration is essentially static. But for certain parameters, there are kind of knobs here and there that can allow you to change certain parameters. But for every parameter, there is a separate procedure. So it's very kind of, it's not very usable, really. So we want to fix that. And also there will be a unified CLI tool. Again, Ignite currently comes with multiple scripts. There is Ignite SH, there is the control SH. I think there is something else, if I'm not mistaken, something for baseline. So it's also we want to unify that as well and have a single CLI tool that is essentially kind of an entry point to everything that is related to Ignite, to all the functionality that Ignite has. And it will allow you to run local nodes and also connect to a cluster and perform certain management operations. So this is, again, just to refresh everyone's memory. So we're going through approximately 3 months milestones by providing alpha versions, alpha releases. So in January this year, early this year, we released the first alpha. So as I said, we started in October last year, and right in the beginning of this year, we released the first alpha, which had this first version of the CLI tool, as well as the configuration engine, which is based on Hawken format, which I mentioned before, and also a couple of internal architectural things as well. Then in June, we released Alpha 2, which was quite a significant milestone. It introduced this data replication infrastructure, which is based on Raft. Again, this is something that is kind of a backbone of the whole architecture. So this is something that will be reused for pretty much any other component in the system, whether it's data synchronization, transactional processing, SQL, or whatnot. it all will come down to this replication infrastructure, which is based on Raft. Then the meta storage, which is essentially the first use of this replication infrastructure. It's meta storage is a company that stores the information about the tables, about the configuration, and anything that has to be shared across the nodes in the cluster. And it also introduced Discovery, which obviously uses this meta storage to exchange the information. The schema manager was also introduced in its first version, its first reincarnation. Again, this is something that allows to create tables and maintain this mapping between tables and schemas. And also the first version of the table API, which is basically the API for data access. It allows you to write the data and read the data back. So Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 are the first alpha releases that have been introduced throughout the year. And this month, a couple of weeks ago, we released the third alpha for Ignite 3. And so let me go through features that were included in this release. So the first one is the SQL engine. So this is this is not a new initiative, and it actually started in Ignite 2.x. And the initiative was to replace H2 with Calcite. Apache Calcite is a framework, open source framework, which is basically designed to act as a foundation for high performance database, high performance distributed database, SQL-based database, typically. So it is a very good fit for the architecture that we have in Ignite. H2 has limitations. H2 is not really designed to be used in the way it's currently used in Ignite. And Calcite is a much better fit. It provides wider SQL support. It provides more flexibility in terms of which kind of optimizations we can apply to SQL query execution. And it also just is more efficient in terms of just memory consumption and CPU consumption. So kind of in the first version, it will provide similar or the same functionality to the engine that we have right now, but potentially with better performance, because again, it's just overall more efficient and provides a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we execute the queries. But in the future, it also gives us this whole variety of different optimizations and SQL capabilities that we can add in the future going forward. So Alpha 3 introduced the first version of this engine with some basic support. It currently doesn't have indexes. Indexes are coming in the next version, but you can connect to the cluster and run SQL queries as usual. And Alpha 3 also comes with the JDBC driver, by the way, which you can use as an API to access the cluster and run those queries. All right, so the next version, the next feature, is the LSM tree storage. So obviously, 2.x has persistence, and we want to have persistence in Ignite 3 as well, of course. And what we currently did is essentially, first of all, we made the persistence storage, or storage in general, for that matter, pluggable. So the architecture that Ignite 3 currently has allows to plug in different implementations of a storage. So it's kind of abstracted behind certain interface if we're looking into the internal architecture. So what that means is that you can use different implementations of a storage for different purposes, right? So if B+3, for example, B+3 based storages, they are typically better suited for read-intensive workloads when you read a lot and do not write a lot. But if it's kind of other way around, you write a lot. If it's write-intensive workload, you might want to use LSM-based storages. And of course, you might want to have just a pure in-memory store, which is just heap memory based or something like that. So architecturally, and that's the biggest part of the release, the biggest the biggest feature, I would say, is that we introduced this pluggability into the architecture. So now we can create different implementations of the storage, and we can also allow to mix and match those implementations for different tables within a cluster, which might become a very powerful feature of Ignite in the future. And as a first step, we also introduced the LSM-based implementation, which is based on RuxDB. So we reused RuxDB under the hood, which is again one product that is really kind of battle tested, which is used by many databases, and we decided to reuse that as well. So we will have LSM implementation based on RuxDB. As for B+3 implementation, which we currently have in TudoDex, we do have plans to transfer it from TudoDex into Ignite 3. That will likely happen in the next 2, 3, 4 months. All right, so the next feature is the unified client protocol. That one basically is about the client APIs, obviously. So what we want to do in Ignite 3 is unify those client APIs. Like in TudoDex, we have thick clients and we have thin clients, which creates certain ambiguity. And it actually, in my experience, causes a lot of confusion for our users. And sometimes it's really hard to explain, why we have two and when to use which and this kind of things, and why thin clients do not support everything that thin clients do. So it's kind of complicated, and we also have to maintain both of the implementations, which makes it harder for the community as well. So we want to unify the APIs. We want to make sure that there is a single set of APIs, and there is a simple, straightforward binary protocol which will implement all those APIs. The protocol, of course, must be cross-platform. It can be implemented in for different languages and for different platforms. It will also be fully async. And in Alpha 3, we have this protocol supports the table API that I've mentioned before, and also provides implementations in Java and .NET. And after I finish here, Pavel will talk about this in a little bit more detail about the protocol itself, as well as the implementation in .NET. So the last feature is data rebalancing. So data rebalancing is obviously, the must feature for a distributed system like Ignite, and Ignite TudoDex obviously, of course, supports that. And the reason I mentioned this is just to highlight that, again, we're trying to create a modular architecture, and we're trying to make sure that the main kind of backbone components of the system are reused whenever it is possible and whenever it's applicable. And like one of the examples is data rebalancing. So instead of kind of implementing a brand new protocol for rebalancing, as we essentially have in TudoDex, we're using the Raft replication infrastructure, the data replication infrastructure, which I've mentioned earlier, and specifically using Raft snapshots for data rebalancing. So again, this is kind of a common theme with Ignite 3, that we are trying to use the existing technologies that are battle tested and well known, and also trying to use them as much as possible within the architecture in order to kind of minimize the new code that we have to write in terms of especially in terms of like internal protocols that are responsible for these kind of things. So a little bit about what's coming next. So these are the most prominent features of Ignite, of Alpha 3. And if you want to try it, just, you can go to the documentation. There is the Getting Started guide, which shows how to install, how to use the CLI tool. And also there are a couple of examples that you can look at if you want to get familiar with the table API and other functionality that Ignite 3 currently provides. So the next alpha will again come out probably like in the next 3-4 months. I guess early next year. Several features are coming there. At least I expect to be there. Probably one of the biggest is, which is currently in progress, is transactional support. So this is also one of the big changes we expect in Ignite 3. First of all, transactions. So we will have kind of a unified mechanism for transactions. So instead of having transactions for key value APIs and transactions for SQL, which we kind of currently have in 2.x, we will essentially have a single transactional model for anything that you for any data access that you perform within the cluster, right? And this transactional model will be applied both to key value API, to the table API, to SQL, and to pretty much anything that we will, introduce going forward. Another thing is that transactions will run on top of partitions, and what this means is that again we're reusing the replication infrastructure that I've mentioned 2 or 3 times before. Partitions, which are essentially raft groups, will be treated as primitive by this transactional protocol. So transactions will work with partitions rather than individual nodes, which actually means a couple of things. First of all, there is the usability improvement of not having a separation between atomic and transactional mode. So currently in 2.x, when you create a cache, you have to specify whether it's atomic or transactional. If it's atomic, it doesn't support transactions, but it's kind of faster. If it's transactional, then it has performance trade-offs, but it supports explicit transactions. So with in Ignite 3, you will just create a table, and whenever you execute a transaction, and if this transaction is collocated, meaning that all the operations go into the same partition, then we will just use raft to replicate because everything is within the same raft group. If it's not collocated and the transaction spawns across multiple partitions and therefore multiple raft groups, then there is an additional protocol that kicks in and kind of makes sure that consistency is preserved as well. Of course, in the latter case, we have performance trade-offs, but that's an explicit transactions that is cross-partition. And we kind of expect that in that case. So again, usability improvement that we don't have to separate those. You create a table and then you can execute any kind of transactions you want. If you collocate, you get better performance. If you cannot collocate, then it still works with those trade-offs. And also this means that since we don't work kind of with individual nodes, it essentially eliminates or almost eliminates the need for PME process or any kind of similar processes that synchronize across the same cluster, which we expect will improve kind of overall stability of the cluster and of the system. And also the transactional support will introduce fully asynchronous APIs. So instead of doing this as we currently do in 2.x, where transactions are essentially synchronous and they're also pinned to a certain thread. So you start a transaction in a certain thread, and then all the operations that you want to be enlisted in that transactions must happen in that same thread as well. So you cannot really do asynchronous transactional processing. In Ignite 3, that's going to change, and the API will be fully asynchronous. So you just create a transaction, and then you can enlist an operation into that transaction anywhere in the system by any thread that you have in your application. So in terms of the timeline, so as I said, this will come out, I think, sometime in January 22 of the next year. And on top of transactions, it will definitely have SQL indexes. I've mentioned that they're currently not supported, and most likely, 2 or 3 other major features as well. So these are several links for kind of previous alpha versions, as well as for the alpha 3 that's been released just now. And for every release, we have like a blog post where we also talk about what the features are in a little bit more detail, maybe, and Also, there are videos with some demos and also some detailed explanations as well. So if you want to dive in, feel free to go to these resources and get more details. All right, so that's all I have. And before we go into questions, I will hand it over to Pavel, who will talk about the client protocol. Thank you. Evgenia, can you take it over? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Valentin. It's lots of exciting stuff. So, as Valentin said, the Alpha 3 version introduces thin clients for the first time, and those clients include the table API. So let's see how this table API looks in the .NET thin client. The connection is actually looks almost the same as you have it in 2.x. You can also you can specify the endpoint here, one or more of them. You can set the logger to see what's going on inside. And the startup is now asynchronous, as you can see. You can get the list of tables, show their names, and you can get the table by name. And the first API you have is a table view. So the table view is just one of the ways to look at the data. It's like a cache with key binary mode in Ignite 2.x, where and Ignite tuple here is similar to a binary object. It's just a set of key value pairs. And in future, we'll have more ways to work with the data. For example, you'll be able to map tuples or rows to custom classes as we do it in 2.x and so on. And Ignite tuple, it is similar to binary object, but unlike binary object, it's mutable, and it doesn't require a separate builder. Overall, we aimed for simplicity and efficiency while designing this new API. For example, the same tuple instance can be reused for multiple absurd operations. Like I set some data here and absurd it, then I change the data and absurd it again, which means I don't have to allocate new objects to perform the data insertion. Moreover, the tuple is an interface, so you can actually implement it yourself. For example, we may want to load some data from an SQL database into Ignite. So we created DB data reader, perform a query, and we want to push the data into Ignite somehow. And you can just implement this interface over the DB data reader. And you don't have to do any extra copies or allocations. You just pass the data directly. And finally, this indexer syntax, indexer initialization syntax is, I think, provides a neat way to express a tuple in code. Now, let's talk about some technical details that I find interesting. As Valentin said, the new client protocol is redesigned. It's now based on message pack serialization, which is fast and compact. And libraries for this message pack are readily available in different languages. So implementing new thin clients is now easier than before. Next, the .NET thin client is fully asynchronous. And we never block any threads. All network-bound calls are async. And we also decided not to include synchronous API at all, following the example of some system APIs like HTTP client. And the implementation doesn't also start any new threads. We rely on the socket async engine provided by the base class library. Finally, we strive to keep memory allocations as low as possible. For example, table absurd call will only allocate two small objects, which is a task completion source and a simple buffer holder. And we use pooled buffers with array pool of byte. And this array pool, as you may know, is also used by many system APIs like the HTTP client or file IO. So this means that resources are reused. Ignite doesn't have to allocate new buffers because those buffers were already allocated by the runtime. And overall, this makes our thin client even thinner than before. That's all that I have for you today. And let's move on to questions and answers on the 3.0.
Yes, Pavel, we've got kind of question for you, I think. Let me show it on our screen.
Okay,
Do
I
you
see
see
it. Yeah, so if all APIs
Please.
I just read it out loud. So if all API for Ignite 3 is async, why do we have async suffix in names like client absurd async? Well, this is like a best practice. Everyone does it. Like it's a Microsoft standard because Microsoft establishes C# standards. If I was to write my own application and design an API for use in my own application, I will drop async postfixes from the API names. But since we are designing a public API library, we should follow the standards, and that's why we have it. Also, not the 100% APIs are async. Some of them will be synchronous when we don't need a network call, when we know that it's completed synchronously. So this is the reason, basically standardization.
Okay, thank you. That was just a kind of quick question. Guys, I see all your questions.
Oops. Did we lost Evgenia?
Sorry, but looks like that.
Okay, I see some more questions, but
we're waiting for her to
I'm here.
join. Ah, here you are. So I was just about to go to the next question because I see that at least two more are for Pavel, and I guess that we have also a question for Val.
Okay, Ksenia, maybe you bring up the next one.
Yeah, sorry, that was actually mine because
okay.
maybe that's also about that synchronous things. The synchronous asynchronous thing, as you can see, is really interesting. And maybe I misheard, but did you mean that that client won't have synchronous APIs anymore?
So, as I just said in my answer to Nikolai, yeah, we may have some of the APIs synchronous, but if the call is by itself, is by its nature asynchronous, for example, a cache get or table get, which requires a network call, so this API is implemented asynchronously, and we would not provide a synchronous overload for this method like we did before. Like you have get and you have get async. Now, if you have get async, you don't have get. This has quite a long explanation. Basically, you don't want to do asynchronous. You don't want synchronous API that calls async API underneath, because this is maybe deceiving to the users. They see it's like a sync method, but they call it and it actually blocks their thread. This is not good. And this is the way that system APIs like HTTP client in the .NET framework itself are now made. So they
okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's the protocol. That's not our solution, right?
Well, yeah, it's our solution to make the API this way. It's just the modern way to do things, and I think.
Okay, I see at least one more question for you. That's from Courtney about thin client. Is a thin client on the support, or we will have thick client support as well?
So yes, the thin client is the only way to interact with the Ignite APIs in 3.0. We will not have an embedded mode or a thick client mode like we did in 2.x. You will only have thin clients in different languages, and this like the client and the server are fully separated. So that's the new way of things.
Thank you. So Val, I think the next question is for you. What about pessimistic transactions in 3.0?
Okay, I've been speaking on mute. Yeah, so I also wanted to add a little bit to the thick and thin clients thing. So basically, yeah, we will only have a single protocol. And again, this this duality of thick and thin clients into the DEX exists only for historical reasons. So we kind of started with what we currently call thick clients, and then we realized that they don't always work. Then we said, okay, let's do thin clients as well. So we kind of created those two applications, and we always try, thin clients always kind of tries to catch up with thick clients, but that doesn't always happen. So we want to kind of get rid of this whole approach, right? So we want to just have a single protocol and a single API, and to unify all those things. And essentially, by saying that we only support thin clients, what we actually mean is that we just have clients, right? So they will support essentially everything that thick clients support. We can implement affinity awareness and all those things. And but again, it's just a single protocol and the single API. As for the pessimistic transactions, so most likely, at least in the current implementation, as far as I can tell, it's implemented basically similar to the current optimistic serializable mode, and I think it's gonna be the case for now. Actually, the goal is to kind of again simplify the API and simplify the configuration here, as well as the implementation for that matter, and essentially just provide serializable isolation without either isolation modes. And the reason for that is essentially that's kind of the route that many databases take nowadays, because higher isolation levels are the most important anyways, and we currently don't really see any significant performance implications because of doing that. So that's kind of the current route that we're taking. But if there is any specific case that you have where you want to use certain modes or certain functionality, we can definitely discuss that, and feel free to write an email to the user list or a dev list, and we'll take a look and probably dive into more detail, and I will have someone who is more experienced in this kind of things take a look and dive deeper into this.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I also have something to present like today. Sorry for kind of...
I think there is one more question, Evgeny, I'm sorry, regarding the cache store, which is currently on the screen. So the cache store, so yeah, we'll definitely have an integration with external databases. How it will look exactly in terms of the API, that's kind of an open question, and it's under discussion. Whether we will have like the cache store interface as we actually have now, I'm not sure, but we will definitely have like an integration with external databases, and we'll do our best to support the use cases that we currently have for kind of database acceleration and these kind of things. So I think that would be the answer for now. But yeah, definitely in the next couple months, and I think we will have a little bit more detail, and again, we can discuss them as well.
Okay, thank you, Val. Yep, sorry, Courtney, I've just missed that you've got many questions today. Let me just make a short promo, and then we will go to questions for sure and spend some time answering it. I just wanted to invite everyone in this meeting to join us on November 16, to join us in our summit. This time we will have kind of a very interesting topic. It will be devoted to cloud, to specific cloud theme. Here you can see the list of our speakers. Actually, I would like to invite you all to meet our CEO, IBM and HP speakers and experts from GridGain and so on. Actually, here is Pavel, and he's one of the committee members of the summit. Pavel, could you please tell something more about our schedule that you've participated, you've just viewed?
Well, yeah. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, as an Ignite community member, I'm really happy to see all those speakers from different companies all over the world on the upcoming Ignite Summit. And since I'm on the committee, I've had a chance to see a couple of those talks, and they are really great, and there is lots to learn from them. There are real world use cases of huge Ignite installations, and our speakers will talk about that. So highly recommend it. Make sure to participate.
Thank you. I hope that all the participants are inspired by such an introduction. Actually, I've got something else to add about the summit. On the pre-conference day on November 15, we will have just several special totally free trainings that you also can attend. You can register on them also using the Ignite Summit website. The link you've got in our chat. And I want to pay your attention, to attract your attention to the new training that we've made especially for this summit. It is a new training about Kubernetes, but all the other trainings are totally good, and we've got the best trainers for you. That is please come, just try to use something, get your questions answered, and of course during the summit we will have Q&A booth with speakers, Apache Ignite experts. For example, Val promised to come for a Q&A session already. So please come to ask your questions to the speakers, to look through the real use cases and so on. This was just a short introduction, and I see that we've got more questions in our chat. Well, yeah, guys, who can answer?
I can take that. Yeah. So, do you plan to have feature parity with 2.x on release of Ignite 3.0? So, the general answer is yes, we do. 3.0 specifically might not have all the features, might lack some of the features, because it will definitely take some time kind of to catch up, and we don't want to wait for the full parity before we release Ignite 3.0. So I think that's going to be the case, that the first version will lack some of them. But generally speaking, yeah, the plan is to provide pretty much the similar functionality that 2.x have, and maybe, like, I would say that the main goal is to support the use cases that 2.x supports, whether it's the same features or maybe a little bit different way of doing things. That's an open question, and it's actually case by case, but we definitely want to support use cases that 2.x supports. So that's kind of an ultimate plan, but that will most likely take some time, obviously, because that's a lot of work.
Thanks. Actually, we've prepared today kind of tricky questions for the speakers, and this is also to you. I know that you've mentioned already this during your talk, Val. Just let us know when we are going to get the final version, and maybe you got some information how many of these versions we will have in the future. Let us know.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So yeah, that's actually a good continuity to the last question, I guess. And so as I said, we don't want to kind of wait for the full parity. So we want to create kind of a minimal product with essential features that is stable and is tested, and then we will release it. I obviously don't know the exact date, but most likely it will be, I would say, or at least I'm kind of looking at middle next year for the first version. Most likely in between. So the Alpha 4 I think will be the last alpha version, at least in a way I see it. But before we release the GA, we'll have one beta version as well, which will have essentially all those features that we want to release in 3.0, or at least the majority of those features, and that would be a version that can be tested. It would not be necessarily fully stable, but it will be the one that can be tested, and will provide kind of the functionality that we want to deliver in 3.0. But generally speaking, I'm kind of aiming at middle of next year. Of course, that can change going forward, but that's kind of the current plan.
Okay, the next question. Courtney takes the stage, the whole stage today.
Does it mean, so it's about thin clients. Does it mean we will need external Ignite nodes that we connect to from an application, or can we have the Ignite jars in our app? So in your applications, you will have Ignite client, and you will use Ignite clients to connect to the cluster. If you want to execute code within the cluster, you will, of course, have compute. You will have services, and within compute and services, and this is something I probably haven't mentioned yet. So within compute and services, you will have the same APIs. Of course, they will not work through this binary protocol, because these are kind of local invocations, because you are in the context of the server node at that point. But the APIs are going to be the same, and that's essentially the whole point. So we want to unify those APIs. We don't want to have client APIs and then server-side APIs, and those are kind of similar but different. So we want to avoid this. We want to have the same set of APIs, which can be used on the server side within compute and service grid, and also on the client side through the binary protocol. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Let us know if you have more of them. Okay. Actually, here also. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Okay. Let me go to you more tricky questions. Let us go to Pavel. And the next question is 10 point.
I'm speaking on
Why
mute
did you
as well. Yeah, so why did you choose message pack for thin clients in 3.0? Why not JSON or protobuf? So we actually did an extensive evaluation of different serialization formats available today. Among other things, we, of course, reviewed the compactness of the format, the performance, the license, of course, because we are going to use the library, not to implement everything from scratch. And actually, message pack comes out as a better choice in many of those areas. It's very flexible. It doesn't dictate you something like protobuf does, because protobuf, for example, requires a schema, but message pack does not. And also, message pack is directly compatible with JSON. So for something clients like JavaScript, where JSON is everywhere, you can directly convert JSON to message pack and back. And as I said, it's very flexible, so we can bend it to any use case we want. And it's really fast, and it uses simple but efficient tricks to reduce the size of the payload. So that's basically the reasons. I have a whole document on this decision. I can link it in the chat if someone wants to know more. That's it.
Thank you. And we've got actually more questions.
I'll take that. With thick clients gone in 3.0, other plans to support P2P class loading. So So first of all, this doesn't really depend on whether we have 3 clients or not. So that would be kind of the first point here. Uh, Again, we have clients, and and the unified API for those clients, and whether we want to have P2P class loading or not, it's kind of a separate question. At the same time, my personal opinion is P2P class loading is a really cool feature. When you read the documentation and when you look at it for the first time. But in my experience, it has kind of a lot of implicit behavior, and it doesn't really always work, unfortunately. And it's not super intuitive, again, for just for the reason that it's essentially implicit. You run the code and it's being magically quote unquote deployed in the cluster. So what we definitely will have in 3.0 is more kind of explicit deployment mechanism, which we actually to a certain extent already have in 2.x, where you just deploy jar files. And again, it will be more kind of again, more explicit framework for code deployment, more explicit way of doing this. So most likely just jar based, so you have jar files and you deploy them. If it's case of Java, of course. If in case of .NET, it's going to be DLLs or something. And that's another problem with P2P class loading, by the way, because it basically works only for Java, and you cannot really implement it for every platform, which complicates things. In case of explicit deployment, it's much easier to make it cross-platform. So most likely we will definitely utilize this kind of mechanism and implement it. Take certain things from 2.x and maybe improve them a little bit. Whether we have P2P class loading or not, I'm not sure, to be honest. Again, in the way it exists right now in 2.x, I would definitely at least simplify it if it's possible. If it's not possible to make it more usable and simple, then I would just stick with more explicit ways of code deployment. Just provide better tooling for this, and make sure that it's always clear which code is deployed, and provide easy ways to deploy and non-deployed code. And then I think the need for P2P class loading actually goes away. And along with all the implicit behavior and usability issues it provides. So that's kind of my personal view on this, at least at this point. This certainly can be discussed further. But again, that's my view.
Okay, thank you. Let me find out if I have more tricky questions. Actually, yep, looks like the one for Pavel.
I think we discussed this already.
Yes, we did.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, maybe Maxim, you could tell us about the next release, some kind of special feature that we could have in it.
We're talking about the 2.x release, right?
2.12, I believe.
Yeah. I think we expect this release coming up in the middle of December or something like this. I suppose it should happen before the new year, before the Christmas holidays. The features that I remember that comes with this release is capture data change application. This, from my point of view, is a really important feature because it can be used for cluster data replication purposes. For example, we have master slave clusters and something like this. Also, hopefully it would support the in-memory cases too, but I don't remember. Uh, Maybe it is the goal for that 2.13 release. However, the capture data change is already in the master branch, So we expect it's in the nearest time. And also, I think the non-index API is important too, and we have a lot of discussion about it. We have uh, uh, yep, IAP for on our wiki pages with some examples, API examples that the user can touch, maybe. Yeah, so this is the second feature for the next release too, but I think we definitely have some process on Apache blog or something like this to share with our users. So again, we expect this in December or something like this.
Thanks. Oh, we've got more questions, and looks like that is about calci and for Val.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. Let me start, Maxim, then you can add. So basically, yeah, currently it's being developed through the DEX. I'm not aware about any specific plans to migrate it, to add it into the DEX and merge into to the DEX as well, but it's been initially developed into the DEX database code base, so it's definitely can happen. But someone need to do this, obviously, in order to make this happen.
No, yeah.
Maxim, go ahead. Yeah, if you
Oh,
want to.
yeah. From my point of view, we're expecting that the calcit will be merged to the 2.x version really soon, maybe in 2.13 or something like this in the beginning of the next year. And I think it's definitely the goal for the 3.x.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, looks like we ran out of questions. Let us wait a couple of minutes, guys. If you have any questions and want to know something special, here is your chance to ask speakers wherever you want to know.
But generally,
terms
they
of-
are always available at user list, at dev list. You can ask us on Twitter.
Yep. I've already sent, if you've missed, I've already sent in our chat the mail. You can, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, Twitter.
Here's our Twitter, and our Twitter guy will find a community member who is able to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.